When you've had a long week and want to mix it up with something new and interesting to eat, try Blue Apron's 2 or 4 serving menu plans with those hard-to-find ingredients sure to spice up your weekend. With 60-plus options each week, you can choose from an ever-changing mix of high-quality meat, fish, vegetarian, WW recommended, and wellness offerings. Order now and get $110 off across your first 5 orders when you visit blueapron.com/unique.
Everybody, welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur. This is Matt here, as always, and this week I am joined again by a very special guest that we've had on a couple episodes ago, Mitch from the Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Thanks, Matt.
Excellent. So I thought maybe we could start. One thing I wanted to mention actually quickly before we get into things, I realized on my site, I think I had the wrong URL for your blog. So I think I fixed it so that it's the correct Video Vacuum site. But I also want to mention too to people, if you're, and we'll talk about, where to find you and stuff later, but if you're not following Mitch on Twitter at the Video Vacuum, that's the best place to go because you'll get the links right away to your sites.
That's right. Yeah, I upload all the links whenever I post a new review, and then you can always hear what I have to say about the world of pop culture and whatever else is going on in the world.
Yeah. The other thing, I actually like your tweets too, because you sometimes you'll pick things out that you saw that interest you that I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of a cool thing to talk about, like this thing about a movie or that something that somebody else is into, which I think is kind of the cool thing about Twitter is that we can kind of all find things that everybody likes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way to kind of engage in the conversation without really, you only get 280 characters, so it's short, it's sweet, and, if I go on a rant, I go on a rant, but usually it's just, I keep it to 1 or 2 tweets.
Yeah, and you never know what you're going to find out there where someone's like, what is your favorite line in this movie, or of this kind of movie or something like that, where you can be like, yeah, let me think about that for a second, or that kind of thing, which I always find that thing kind of fun. So, yeah, if you're not following Mitch if you're not following the Video Vacuum on Twitter, definitely do. If you're following me on Twitter, I do retweet some, so you'll see some of those as well. So, but definitely, I think, for sure. At least you're going to get the correct link to the site. I think I fixed it on my blog, but hopefully, if anybody does go try to find your site for my blog and you get an error, let me know. You can message on Facebook or something like that, and I can fix it.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, any traffic you send my way, I do likewise.
Perfect. I appreciate it. That sounds good. Yeah, I think it's good we get kind of these like-minded, people that they're into one kind of movie. It's like, yeah, if you're into what we're into, then definitely check out, because we're only putting out so much content, so there's plenty of room out there for everybody to kind of get their fill and kind of go, here's someplace, or here's somebody else who had a different opinion or goes into more of these kinds of movies or that kind of thing. I think it's always a positive for sure.
And it was cool too. I was on Cam Sully's podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that he said it's me, it's you, and then Ty and Brett. He said, if you see a movie and there's all 3 of our names on the IMDb external reviews page, he said it's probably your movie. It's really. He said he called us. He didn't call us the Holy Trinity or anything, but he said it's like usually if you see those 3 names on that page, like you're in the right spot.
Right. I think that's probably a good way to think of it. Yeah, for sure. Because Ty and Brett, they're another ones who watch a lot. They've got a lot in there. I'm trying to get back to that point where I watch a lot, but I'm kind of trying to move in that direction. But yeah, for sure. I think that's probably a good safe bet. Like if the 3 of us have watched it, and even if we don't all agree on it, I think if the 3 of us, if it's caught all of our radars, that's probably a good sign that it's like Cam was saying, it's probably the movie for you for sure. Perfect. Now, what if, speaking of movies, anything that you've seen lately that sort of really stood out to you?
Like right now, I'm just kind of catching up over the holidays. I kind of took a little break. But I've just been, I recently moved and we cut cable, so I've been getting into more like streaming. And honestly, Tubi is phenomenal it has, all the kind of grindhouse stuff and direct-to-video stuff that we enjoy. But I mean, there's a lot of really good independents on there. I saw Shotgun Stories, Jeff Nichols' directorial debut with Michael Shannon. I thought that was fantastic. So I've been kind of, one of my goals, this spring is to kind of catch up on both of their filmographies, because that movie, it was one of the only movies I could think of that was a vengeance-driven tale, but it was done as like a quirky independent movie, and it was the only movie I can think of that kind of made me think of Death Wish and Napoleon Dynamite in the same kind of breath. So that was really good. Yeah,
that's a really good point you mentioned about Tubi, because I think I go into Tubi thinking like, okay, I want to see like what, Samurai Cop 2 or, whatever, that kind of movie is in there, and I'll see ones like that where it's like, oh, that's kind of one I'd be interested to see at some time, and I don't think to make a note of like, that was in there, but you make a great point, because it's such a good site, because there's commercials, obviously. It's not like as intrusive as like watching a movie on TV where you get commercials every 15 minutes, so I don't think it's that bad, but I like that setup where the commercials pay for us to be able to watch it, so we don't have to pay to stream it or anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things. For every movie I watch, I add like 10 to my queue, because I'm always the victim of the customers also watched list, and then I'll just start blindly adding things, especially if it's an actor or director, and like a guy like Ted V. Michaels, they have like all of his movies on there, so I just keep clicking and keep adding them.
Yeah, I that's a good point too. It's like those algorithms are really good, aren't they? Like figuring out what we want to watch next.
I know it's scary up to the point where like I mean, honestly, I could probably just have Tubi by itself, but I found a couple on Roku. They have a one digital drive-in that actually has old 3D movies. So if you have a pair of red and blue 3D glasses, in 3D, and the 3D isn't bad for, home viewing.
I would be interested to check out, because I have not done 3D in a long time, and yeah, that's something that I think would be cool. And another one that I check out on Roku that I stream is Vidmark Videos, which I thought is a really good channel. Where like I don't know if you've noticed, if you check that one out, where the VHS or the thumbnails for the movies have little VHS.
Yeah, Vidmark is.
Oh yeah, like that. Yeah, you can see some of those little stickers, like the VHS movie stickers that you get at the video store.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit here.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mitch? I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to walk around the room a little bit here.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, Vidmark is. I found some really good stuff, like the old Chuck Vincent teenage sex comedies from the 80s are on there, and as well as like all the old artisan 90s action movies. They have a really good selection.
Yeah, I've always found that to be a cool one. Yeah, one interesting, kind of talking about streaming. One that I watched recently that I think everybody else has already seen was My Name is Dolomite, the Netflix original, and it's interesting because I'm going to be reviewing it for the site, but I kind of am starting to wonder with some of these Netflix originals if I should be considering them direct to video. I mean, I know it had a limited theatrical release, so it could win awards and whatnot. But it's kind of going to be interesting going forward to see like direct-to-video connoisseur, like what that means. Like obviously I'm not like really strict to it completely. But generally the definition for direct-to-video for me is something that does all of its damage in the video realm. And so technically that's what Netflix is. So it's going to be interesting because it really, to compare a movie like My Name is Dolomite to, something like we're going to be discussing here, like Altitude, it is a little bit of, My Name is Dolomite is something that probably would have been in the theaters 10 years ago, I think, and would have probably made a lot of, would have done well, I think, in the theaters. Maybe it wouldn't have been a huge billion-dollar blockbuster, but it's something that the theaters would have made. Would have wanted to make, which nowadays they don't necessarily, and Netflix jumps in to fill the void. So it's going to be interesting going forward to see how those kinds of movies are for me.
Well, I think it's, I think the cutoff is really where is the bulk of the home viewing.
Yeah.
It's if it is in theaters, it's probably a limited release, but the majority of the people are going to see it at home. So I would keep it. I mean, which is interesting because now the Irishman will be kind of in the same cahoots as like like something like Altitude. So
right. I know if The Irishman wasn't over 3 hours, I think I probably would have watched it and reviewed it by now. And that is interesting to think about with like a Scorsese picture that, that's what we're talking about now. It's that, he's technically direct to video. He did another one that went straight to Netflix as well, that Bob Dylan's Rolling Theater Review or something like that, Rolling Thunder Review, which was like some kind of a mock documentary on Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it's a whole new world now with streaming, and I was very skeptical at first, but I mean, even the free stuff. I mean, there's commercials, and they often break in the middle of a guy's sentence, or right when they're about to introduce a crucial plot point, you'll see like a ad for some miracle drug with 800 side effects. But if that's the price I gotta pay for free, then I think we're doing good.
Yeah, compared to what free is when you're watching it on TV. I mean, growing up, it seemed like movies would, like every 15 minutes or so, they go in for commercials, and they would edit the movie too so that it could fit with commercials and all that. So then you never knew what kind of a version of the movie you were getting. Forget about editing it for violence or sex or language, but they would also edit the movie. I mean, that was kind of the big controversy with Home Alone 2 in Canada with the Donald Trump scene being edited out, was that people thought it was for political reasons, but no, it was an old edit from like the 2013, I think, from well before Trump was running, where the person editing the movie just said, well, this scene really doesn't do anything for the movie, so we're cutting it out. Which, I mean, it's like the director made a decision to keep that scene in, but you're watching it on TV and that person makes an additional move. So that, with Tubi, it's like, you get the commercial in the middle of somebody saying something, but at least with Tubi, they're not saying like, oh, we're going to cut this scene out because we want it to fit in the block of time here before the nightly news is on or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, there are a few, Netflix and I mean even Disney Plus, I mean, and Prime, which they're the only ones that I pay for right now. And I mean even YouTube has a wealth of stuff if it doesn't get taken down, almost immediately. But like the old like erotic thrillers from the 90s are on there. I mean, and then that's where I get like a lot of my El Santo movies. And again, it's like, somebody also watched this movie. I'm like, yes. I mean, I've been going through the El Santo filmography just on YouTube. Yeah,
we just did a PM Entertainment podcast, and a lot of those are on YouTube as well. Almost, I think like 90% of that catalog is on YouTube, which is, I think I think that's great. I think, I think the thing with YouTube now is that YouTube has gotten to this point where if you have copyrighted material, you know where to find it and get it taken down. So it's almost like if something's up there, it's being left up there for. I mean, that's maybe I'm being naive about it, but I feel like if something's up there, it's being left up there for a reason. That like some, maybe like the PM Entertainment people, whoever's involved, like they want it up there. They want us to be able to view it that way, and which I kind of think is an advantage. I think if I'd made a movie, I would want it on YouTube, and yes, I'd want people to be able to buy it too, but maybe you see it on YouTube and then you spend the money for the DVD or something like that.
Well, even there are cases where the movies themselves have commercials on there, even on YouTube, so they're getting some revenue from it. If you're seeing a commercial on it, 9 times out of 10, like you said, it's meant to be up there now. It's not like the Wild Wild West days of a few years ago where something would be up one day and then taken down immediately the next.
Yeah. It seems like if it's up there, you can feel a little bit better about it now than before, where there was this idea that maybe you're taking money away from somebody. Now it's sort of like, okay, people know how to get things taken down. They know how to, to search and look for titles, and they hire people that do it, which, I mean, granted, like if we're watching things for free that are copyrighted, it's kind of like we're feeding into possibly this need for nannies to go in there and check everything. But the same is true. I mean, I think when you see a movie that's been up there for 5 years or something like that, that's a good sign that movie is up there because the person that made it is okay with it being up there.
And a lot of those movies, especially like I was saying with the erotic thrillers, those the rights for a lot of those, they were bought up, independently made films that were bought up by Roger Corman or whoever was needed the product at the time. And then when that company gets bought out, these small independent producers, they don't really have that outlet anymore that they had 20 years ago where they could distribute something. So that's sadly why like a lot of that stuff is just never going to make it to Blu-ray or even DVD now. So aside from finding it on eBay or lucking on it at a thrift store, that's going to be your only option. So that, like you said, like I don't feel bad like I'm pirating something because I'm watching on YouTube because it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And you make a good point. Like you think of like PM Entertainment, for example, was one who they sold their company in like 2000, 2001, something like that. So right, like I don't think like Pepin and Mary or whoever is making anything off of those movies or the actors or anything like that. I don't really know how it works anymore, but those PM Entertainment, like I don't know who would have the rights to be able to put those on DVD, and I don't know who's I mean I think there are people that would love to see like the Sweeper or Zero Tolerance or something like that on Blu-ray, but it's not really. There isn't a lot of clamoring for that, and a lot of those movies, even though they went direct to video, they also kind of went direct to HBO as well, and I think that's where a lot of they almost had a television type quality to them as well, or cable cable premium TV quality, that it almost like YouTube is kind of the best way. Like you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles of a nice Blu-ray for something like that.
And a lot of those, I mean, the actors probably barely got paid the first time around. I don't think there's anything in the way of residuals coming to them.
Right. Those are movies that they put on their bio, and they were just happy to. Yeah, exactly. They were happy the check cleared, and they were good to go. And so, yeah, that's for sure. Well, kind of transitioning here into our movie this week. So we're kind of doing this sort of Dolph celebration. We had a PM Entertainment podcast in between, but 2 podcasts ago, Will from Exploding Helicopter and I looked at an older Dolph film, Red Scorpion, but now this week Mitch and I, we're going to be looking at Altitude, which is going to end up being the 50th movie we've reviewed for Dolph Lundgren on the direct-to-video connoisseur, which is, it could be a good or bad thing when we get into Altitude to see if it's worthy of that distinction. But he's going to be the first actor on the direct-to-video connoisseur who's had 50 movies reviewed.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, my website's motto has always been quantity over quality, and I don't think very few people like embody that the way that Dolph does, because I mean he just grinds these things out at like a surreal pace. Like I don't know if he even sleeps anymore.
Right. Yeah, and you look at his bio now, it seems like there's almost a pattern where it's like 1 theatrical film and 2 DTV. It's like Creed 2 and then an Altitude and a Dark Water or something like that, and then Aquaman, and then something like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, because maybe those are the only 2 theatrical ones he's done, and he's still doing more of these DTV ones. But it feels like he's sort of doing it that way, where he's getting something big along with a couple others of these DTV flicks.
Yeah, and I mean, more power to him, because I think he's only gotten better with time. And I mean, I think in Creed 2, he's just phenomenal. And I mean, he does very much with very little screen time in the way of dialogue. But I mean, his final moments, in that movie are just like heartbreaking. I never thought I would care about Ivan Drago, but he made me care about Ivan Drago. And and like I said, him and Stallone are buds, and he calls him up, says, "You want to do this thing? Yeah." "And you want to do Expendables 1 through 3? Yeah." Mm-hmm. And I think they're at the they've made their money probably, and I think guys that are still in it at this age are doing it for the fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there is the part of it too. I think that they do have things that they have to pay off, or things that they have to cover, and so I think that's why they do some of these, like, maybe one, smaller things, or they're in there for only a little bit of the movie. But I think you're right too, that also it is about, I think they're at a level where they can, I don't know. When I saw that movie, I should say, I was going to say that they pick their projects and pick the best ones, but Dead Trigger, I don't know if you've seen that one, that Dolph did. I reviewed it recently. I think he did it in actually the same year he did Aquaman. So it's a real low budget one, and it's one that kind of makes me wonder if maybe Dolph needed, was looking for cash. But I wonder if now, you get into these big budget ones where maybe there's ways that he gets money on the back end. I don't know if it works the same for him as it would for like a Stallone, but getting him into an Aquaman, things like that, where it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you can put Dolph in a movie and on the big screen. And Expendables as well. I don't think people would have been wondering where was Dolph if he wasn't in the Expendables. And so I think he's at that level that I'm hoping that he does kind of get to that point where he doesn't feel like he has to do a lot of these. But by the same token, you love that they grind them out like that. You love that there's sort of that Eric Roberts quality where they're just kind of just getting in as much as they can.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think it's one of those Nicolas Cage situations where he's still, paying off a dinosaur skeleton that he bought in the 90s. But yeah, I mean, when you look over the filmography and you see that he did like maybe 1 or 2 movies a year in the 90s, and in the 2000s he did maybe 2 or 3 or 4 movies, and now he's doing like 4 or 5 movies a year plus television appearances. He was just on like It's Always Sunny, and these movies probably aren't that demanding. I mean, in Altitude he basically sits the whole movie, but you're on the call sheet for probably half a day. You're in the trailer probably the other half, and it's a gig. There's a lot of bands out there that they're not playing stadiums anymore, but they'll play bars, they'll play clubs, and they're in it, and they've been in it for decades, and they're gonna keep on keeping on.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that Dolph in this movie, I kind of just thinking about this movie in general. I don't know about you, but there's a kind of a sense when you're watching this movie. I mean, I'm not saying that Denise Richards was horrible. And then, beyond Denise Richards, there aren't really a lot of named people other than maybe like Chuck Liddell. But there's something about when Dolph walks onto that plane into first class with his suit on and everything, that it's just almost like it's like an applause moment. It's like Norm coming into the bar in Cheers, It was it just sort of changed the whole tenor of the movie for me. And granted, we were watching this knowing we were going to be talking about Dolph, so that was part of it. But I don't know about you. Did you get a sense that like sort of the movie, he even though he's barely in the movie, his presence is so big in it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's I kind of had a feeling when I saw he was second billed, but or has the end billing that kind of to hedge my expectations of how much Dolph we were going to get. But like he never phones it in. I mean, he was intense. He was I mean, one of the things that I liked about this movie was that it was very compact. It kept moving. Every scene kind of needed to be there.
Hmm.
And once you get to his moments, he delivers, and he is intense. Honestly, they could have probably had the automatic pilot from Airplane play his role, but I mean, when he's in the captain chair, with everybody's fates in his hands. I mean, there's a little bit of gravity there. I mean, he sells the menace just right, and like I said, like this movie it was a no frills movie, but like you said, like his presence alone kind of just that's shorthand for saying, okay, we just kicked it up a notch.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And, one thing I think too is, I always talk about the Destro effect in movies because I grew up with GI Joe, and I always thought Destro was cooler than the GI Joe characters, and so I always talk about that Destro effect. And I thought this movie was going to run into that, and it seemed like they mitigated it by saying, Dolph is going to blow up a plane with 200 people on it when they escape, and you realize, like, okay, well, yeah, if 200 people are going to die, I want to see Dolph lose. I want to see Denise Richards prevail and defeat him. So that was like enough for me to say, okay, because I was wondering how they were going to do that, because I kept thinking, like, I want Dolph to win. Like, he's so fantastic here that he's such a great baddie that I was rooting for him. But that was one thing I did like. One of the things for me, and I don't know how you feel about airplane movies in general, but I feel like, the most exciting, of course, is when the hatches are blown and people are being, trying to hold on for dear life and not get thrown, and then they're fighting and not trying to get thrown from the plane. That's always the most exciting. But I always find sometimes it's hard to get good action scenes because it is a little bit of a claustrophobic environment. What do you think about the airplane movies in general?
Well, I mean, this movie definitely fell into that trap. If you're looking for an action movie, I mean, there's only so many places you can put a camera when they're having a fight scene in the already cramped business class aisle of an airplane. And I don't think they really could afford to have one of those breakaway planes where they could take away sections to put the camera in, because everything was very, like you said, claustrophobic, very Seagal era. Elbows and knees are all you're seeing. But this movie kind of hooked me early on, and I was at peace with that, and I was at peace with the video game CGI of the airplane, plummeting and coming back down, and I think there was this scrappy element to it that I enjoyed. That you're gonna call me crazy, but it in this comparison is just kind of, not tongue in cheek, but sort of, but it kind of reminded me of Showdown in Little Tokyo a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. It's because the way that both films kind of turn cliches kind of on their ear. In Showdown, you had Dolph being the very the one that was in tune with Japanese culture, whereas Brandon Lee was not. You would think it would be the other way around. And this, it was the women in the movie were serious. They were physically capable. They were very, very proactive. Whereas the men, like every single male character except for Dolph, was a klutz or a moron. And it did. They say that there aren't enough good roles for women of a certain age in Hollywood. I think Altitude kind of proved them wrong a little bit here.
Yeah, I was going to mention that because I thought Denise Richards was really serviceable in this. She was really good. I thought this was I think you see Denise Richards and you think, like, okay, you get an idea of what you think she would be, but she really was kind of a throwback to those no-nonsense FBI agents who, get in trouble, right? Or they do, they do whatever they're not supposed to do, and they're kind of, getting reprimanded or whatever, she had that kind of no nonsense quality for it. And even like when she's fighting Chuck Liddell, I think you're right. Like by making Chuck Liddell's character into a good, sort of lack of a better term, a moron who didn't really know what he was doing. And then here she is trying to fight him. Obviously, he's a lot bigger than her. We have to sort of divorce the fact that we know he's a trained fighter in real life versus his character in the movie. So that part of it. But she does kind of defeat him by outsmarting him to some extent, while also being, no nonsense and willing to take a punch here or there and willing to kind of, get physical and not back down from him. But, she kind of just gets to her gun in time and gets him. But I think, I agree with you there that it was really great that, and also the baddie, she was kind of she was the muscle in that group. It wasn't Dolph who was the muscle. He was supposed to be the guy who could handle all the technology. And there is even a point where he yells at her, the woman Sadie, who's the sort of the baddie who is fighting against Denise Richards. He yells at her and she makes a comment like, "What are you doing yelling at me?" And he's like, "You're right, I'm sorry." So we kind of know that she's even with Dolph being so awesome and how great he is, she was kind of in charge as well, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, she did great. That was Greer Grammer, who's actually Kelsey Grammer's daughter.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she, like, right from the opening minute, because you see her with the very bad wig, and you kind of know she's like the Elizabeth Hurley Passenger 57 kind of, and so it was very refreshing to see her, like, barking orders at Chuck Liddell and like him kind of like, you're right, okay. But it also made a very credible threat, at the end of the film where, Denise Richards has to basically fight her for control of the airplane. So that it was, like I said, it was always a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. And then those moments in the movie like this kind of add up. Mm-hmm. And, a DTV movie, I kind of grade on a curve anyway. So, I mean, this was actually one of my probably favorite, DTV Dolph ones of the last few years.
Yeah, and bringing up Showdown in Little Tokyo again, and also kind of talking about sort of grading DTV movies on a curve. Another thing that those two movies have in common for me is the no wasted space. Showdown is like a 75-minute film. This one, it comes in, I think, right around 90 or maybe like 88. But there are even points in the movie, like, remember there's this scene where that the woman who's the flight attendant who gives Denise Richards the upgrade to first class. She ends up getting attacked in the bathroom by one of the baddies. So of course the baddie's actually wearing the woman's stewardess outfit, or the woman's flight attendant outfit. But she is, I guess, tied up in that bathroom for most of the movie, and we don't see her until the very end, where we see like she'd had tape on her mouth or something that she'd had somehow extricated. So there were obviously scenes with her in that bathroom, probably struggling to get out, that the director said, we don't really need this. We don't need to bother with this. We're just going to go right from her being attacked in the bathroom to Denise Richards finding her in there and rescuing her, which I think there were probably a lot of times like that when the movie, that gave me a sense that maybe this was going to be bigger, and whoever was making it decided to make those cuts, which I'm always in favor for with a direct-to-video movie. That's sort of like my number one thing is the runtime. Is the runtime good? And then, yeah, what did they do with that runtime?
Yeah, and like I said, it seemed like every scene needed to be there. It served at least some purpose, either to enhance Denise Richards' character or to further the heist that was going on. And I mean, even from the opening scene, I mean, I was not expecting Denise Richards to get the opening unrelated badass scene where she's having, goes from having phone sex with the guy who's holding people hostage, to like saving the day. And when he's like, "Oh, what are you wearing?" And she's like, "Kevlar." I was like, I knew I was in for a good time with this movie.
Yeah, and like you said, I think this is one of those ones that maybe, I don't know if we want to call it a trailer bait and switch, because bait and switch probably isn't the best term, because it's because bait and switch, we think of something showing us something is going to be really good and it's really bad. But I almost felt like the trailer didn't do this movie any favors. It felt like the trailer was saying this is going to be pretty paint by numbers, and you're not going to get what we got out of it. I don't know if you thought the same thing, or even the way it was marketed.
Well, I mean, I actually didn't even watch the trailer. I'm at the point now. I just see Dolph's name in the on the box. I'm like, all right, that's good enough for me. So I didn't even watch the trailer, but I had a feeling it was going to be like some Passenger 57, executive decision, Air Force One, and it delivered on that. I mean, we had, they were in the cargo hold, which, if you're in an airplane movie and you don't have a fight scene in the cargo hold, what are you doing?
Yes.
So, you had that, like you said, it had the scene where people were getting sucked out of the door of the airplane. You had the gratuitous over-the-top death of a flight attendant.
Right. Yes. Which we wanted, right? That was an applause scene for us.
And I had the scene where the bad guy gets over the intercom. I mean, it checked all the boxes, but like I said, in between those moments, it had little moments of wit and character, and it was, for what it was surprising. I was surprised. I was as surprised as I was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. I think I was waiting for the movie to turn. Maybe I shouldn't say this. Maybe I shouldn't be this cynical. But I was kind of waiting for me to hit the lull. I was waiting for it to not be that good. And I mean, I think there were a lot of things that were happening in the movie that worked. One is, it felt like everybody who got killed in the movie deserved. I don't know if I should say deserved to die, because that's kind of a strong thing. I mean, the flight attendant who was like dancing up and down the aisles to tell people how to do their seatbelts. Maybe he didn't deserve to die, but you kind of felt like we were okay with it. It was an applause scene for us, in that kind of a movie. And the pilots that were talking, like they're these chauvinists who were talking about hooking up with women while they were flying the plane and stuff. And so you're just like, when the Sabrina character comes into the cockpit, and they're trying to hit on her, and she kills them. That's you want to see her do that, and that's almost like one of those things too, where they have to really mitigate that concern and not have us rooting for the baddies, which I think they did a good job of that with a lot of innocent people on the plane that were menaced, and again, that idea that they were going to just blow up that whole plane, and the idea was that they'd blow up the plane and that our baddies would escape, but there'd be bodies there to replace them to make it seem like they were died. So I think when you're going to kill 200 people, that's enough to make us not want to root for the baddies anymore. So I thought they did a good job of mitigating a lot of those kinds of things that can turn a direct-to-video movie bad.
And I especially love the way that they had Dolph's ID badge on the dead body, and it was nothing more than his picture from the IMDb page.
Yes, I was going to say
I mean, I laughed so hard at that. I was like, like I said, there was always this little moment that just made me chuckle to myself, and I'm like, I'm having a good time with this.
Yes. Yeah, there were a few things like that happened. I mean, Denise Richards, when she tries to go get in her seat, and it's like all of the bad things about Coach that we think about, which I've never flown first class, so it's not like I know any better than Coach, but it's sort of like, I mean, I've never had anybody not give me their seat, when it's my seat. I've not had somebody who's sitting in my seat not get up and take it, because usually nowadays with the way planes work, you get arrested for trying to pull that. But it was kind of one of those things where it's like, we're getting the sense of how she got demoted, and all of that. And yet it was still like with some of these characters that seemed kind of annoying in the Coach area of the plane, you also didn't want to see them die. And so they did things with that I think the last time I saw a really good snake, or a really good airplane movie was Snakes on a Plane, which was a long time ago. Like the last one to come out. I shouldn't say it. So it's been a while since I've really enjoyed an airplane movie.
Yeah, and I mean, even with the scene with the air marshal, she goes to him and she quickly realizes it's his first flight. He's nervous. I think if this movie was made in the 90s, they would have had somebody like Patrick Muldoon to kind of shoulder the heroic aspects, and kind of divvy it up between them. But now it was refreshing where even the guy that she thinks that could help her is a doofus. And it put more of the emphasis on her character and forced her to be more resilient. And I mean, like I said, it was just refreshing where the lead, the female lead of your DTV movie, it's not like we could have just had a guy, or we could have just put a woman in there, but surrounded her with all these strong male characters to kind of shoulder the action scene. So I mean, would I like to see maybe like Gina Carano or somebody that could have really kicked some butt, maybe, but I was completely happy and tickled with the way that Denise Richards handled it.
Yeah, they really did a good job, and I think she did a really great job of buying in with what they had for her. I think you're right about that it's too easy when you have a female lead to just make a strong guy to help back her up when she needs it. That's an easy movie. I mean, you think of how many Cynthia Rothrock movies you saw where Richard Norton was there, and I think Richard Norton always did his best to make sure that Cynthia Rothrock was in the lead when those movies happened, but it was still one of those things where the movie felt like they had to have a Richard Norton in there, and this movie was like, yeah, here's our Richard Norton, and he's a doofus just like all the other guys, and really Denise Richards has got to do this on her own. And I mean, there was the guy that was the thief that she was kind of working with and not working with, and I thought that was another equally good decision there, where it's like she can't exactly trust him, she doesn't exactly like him, but yet on the other hand she's a negotiator, so she needs what he has that they want to be able to get off the to kind of solve this situation as well. So yeah, I think you're right about that. They really mitigated a lot of those things that we see in those kinds of movies.
Yeah, I mean, and there was even a little bit of kind of like hinting at a non-stop situation, the movie with Liam Neeson, where it was going to be, I thought it was going to be like a little bit more, people on their cell phones and, trying to wire money and all this stuff. And they cut that right out. It was just like, look, I'll give you $50 million if you help me or whatever. Yeah. There wasn't nobody tried to call the cops. They just handled the situation. Like you said, there was no kind of lull in it, thing where she calls her boss and the boss can't be there because she's on, those stock characters. It didn't have any of those kind of hiccups to slow the movie down.
Yeah. I think overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. I don't know about you. I think you're feeling the same way, that this was one that we didn't have. I think we were trying to think of a good Dolph movie to discuss while we were doing this podcast, and I know you made this suggestion, and I think we weren't sure what we were going to get for a Dolph podcast, but I think this one definitely it was surprisingly good.
And again, we didn't really spend a lot of time talking about Dolph. I mean, he really didn't have a lot to do, but he, like you said, his presence alone kind of ups the ante. Like, if Dolph's on the plane and he's not playing the hero, that it's going to be like a fight to the finish. So he did well with what he was given. Like, as you said, like the scenes with him and Sadie the henchman, there was like this tension, genuine tension between them, and and even with making her like a strong, powerful woman, it was, I'm sure Dolph gets plenty of these things over his desk, and he was probably like, oh yeah, Denise Richards wants to punch a lot of people, let her do it. I'll just sit down for half the movie.
Right, which I think was a great idea. Now, thinking about Dolph overall, as we kind of hit this 50. Which is just kind of crazy. We always consider him to be like the Babe Ruth of direct-to-video movies, because that's how I've always kind of considered him. And I feel like he's sort of a looming figure. I mean, it's interesting as you think of like a Seagal who had a theatrical career and that was in DTV, or Van Damme kind of the same way, or an Eric Roberts who just grinds out hundreds of movies. I mean, he's just got so much. Dolph is a unique figure because, like you said, I mean, the moment he steps into the movie, you're feeling, like this is the main character. I mean, what are your thoughts on his career kind of overall?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, not everybody's first movie. Well, I know he was in, even then, being in A View to a Kill, for his first movie, that's there's no bigger stage than being in the James Bond movie, and then you go from that to being the villain in a Rocky movie. So right there, I mean, you're already kind of, at the top of your game, as far as I'm concerned. It was interesting in his early going career, like how he kind of capitalized on that. And I think he made a lot of missteps early. I think he regretted being in the Masters of the Universe. Yeah. Besides, The Punisher, which, both of us really enjoy, and, something like Showdown Little Tokyo, like, I know a lot of people like I Come in Peace, which for me almost feels like somebody stapled two scripts together, like a mismatched buddy movie with like a hidden kind of thing. And so there was a couple movies there where you see him even in the beginning of the 90s having to have somebody like a Van Damme and Universal Soldier to kind of shoulder the billing, because it kind of became apparent early on that he just couldn't do it alone, but that video market was there at just the right time where he could make that transition and then just start grinding these things out and not having to worry about what the opening weekend was going to be like.
Yeah, because that Masters of the Universe one, I feel like everybody should have kind of known that was sautéed in wrong sauce from the beginning. That you're gonna take this cartoon character, which you had to make a movie of it, right? Because it was just generating, those characters were generating so much heat that the figures, it was like they couldn't, they were printing money with those things. But this idea that you're going to do it on the cheap by having it set in on Earth. But I think from Dolph's standpoint, Dolph probably thought this was going to be a game changer. The way that when you see that the doomed Roger Corman's Fantastic Four movie, where the people that were involved with that thought this was going to be their big break in the movies. I think Dolph felt like, this is going to be my big, I'm the leading man thing, and it didn't work out. And then Punisher just didn't work out. And I think you're right that he had those mistakes, those missteps that caused, or I don't even know how much their missteps, or if they were, on him, or if they were on the movies themselves, and he just kind of made some bad decisions. But then when we get into the 90s, and then, when we've kind of turned that corner into where the video market, where like, PM comes along, which Dolph didn't do any PM movies. He was a little bit beyond that. But I think you had a lot of people like, Sidney J. Fury, Russell Mulcahy, Margaret Lester, Furstenberg, people like that who also were getting into DTV, because I think the action movie market was starting to, the kind of the big explosive kind of things, that was starting to die down a bit too. So he kind of got into that niche in the 90s, right at the time that it was really booming for us.
Yeah, and you make a good point with, especially early on and, throughout his career, pardon me, he worked with, like you said, top talent that were making theatrical movies, just a few years before that. So it wasn't like a big sea change. It was just doing what he was doing before, just in a smaller pool. Yeah.
And it I think that's sort of where he builds this. We start to see him now as people who watch direct-to-video movies. It's like, of course Dolph can lead a film, because we're seeing all of these. And I mean, there were definitely some hits and misses in there in the 90s when that comes. And I think what was great was when the Expendables came around, it almost felt like for us in the who watched a lot of these DTV movies and lower budget movies, it was cool for us to see Dolph back there on the big screen doing a blockbuster like this that Stallone was making.
And I mean, it says a lot, all those kind of egos and, all the testosterone on that set. I mean, with maybe the exception of Mickey Rourke, I mean, he kind of steals the movie.
Yeah.
And I think originally they wanted him to die, but like, he was so likable in that movie, they're like, we'll just bring him back, and and I mean, it's like one of those things, like you said, like even with all those big names, when he comes on, it's like that fist pump moment, and you're like, okay, you're gonna get something gold with him.
Yeah, and one thing I really liked about the Expendables movie too is where he has that fight scene with Jet Li, and we for a long time we were getting these movies, and maybe Stallone was kind of didn't like that trend where it went from the big guys to the smaller guys who could really do martial arts. But there was always that trend where like a Jet Li would go in and just destroy a whole bunch of big guys in a movie. And one thing I liked about that fight scene that he did with Dolph was that Dolph is a supreme athlete, but also much bigger than someone like a Jet Li. And it was like when they were fighting in an even playing field, he couldn't Jet Li couldn't defeat Dolph because Dolph was bigger and stronger and also well versed in martial arts, and that Jet Li had to bring him into locations where they didn't have the height or anything like that. And I thought that was really cool to kind of really showcase Dolph's talent and his well, I mean, he was Olympic caliber karate. He competed in karate contests, and also we know the pentathlon movie where he was in the modern pentathlon as well. But he was an Olympic caliber athlete and was well versed in martial arts, and so to show him against someone like that and for us to be able to see that, I thought that was really cool.
When the Expendables was kind of like the culmination of like all those kids in the schoolyard saying, well, who would win, Rocky versus the Terminator or whoever, so you got to see guys like Dolph and Jet Li not only on screen together, but kind of antagonizing each other and getting into a fight, and seeing guys like when you get to the second one, Jason Statham and Scott Adkins. And I know there's a little bit of backlash with those movies because I don't know. I think the criticisms of those movies always seem to be like, well, no one died. How can they be expendable if they don't die? I think they were really expecting it to be like this kind of Wild Bunch, Dirty Dozen thing. I'm like, no, I don't want to see any of those guys die. If anything, I want to see them, standing elbow to elbow, blowing up the scum of the earth. And that's what we got from those movies. And I'm always kind of perplexed at the criticisms that are thrown at those movies.
Yeah, because I think the idea, right, that Stallone's idea by calling them the Expendables was that it's just that, okay, these are the people that the rich people don't care so much about, right, if they live or die, and that they're bucking the trend, right, or that their revenge is that they survive, that they're expected to die, nobody cares if they live or die, and so they're only I guess like you almost think of like the Mickey Rourke scene, right, where he has that scene where he's talking about, in the first movie about, I can't remember, it was like some kind of a mission that he was on that went bad or all of that, and kind of talking about the reasons why they do this, why they get in there, why they try to save the day and all of that. So I always kind of felt like, yeah, that Stallone was kind of using the term ironically, right, that they're expendables, but they're more than that, or they're going to make themselves more than that.
Exactly, and I think it was also kind of like thumbing their nose at the establishment, saying that Hollywood basically says we're expendable because we make these B grade movies, and then
Nope, Mitch, can you hear me? I think you might.
Separately, we're. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. I was just saying that the it was kind of like thumbing their nose at the Hollywood system too, because for a while they were either for politics or because their movies weren't performing as well as their previous films. They were kind of written off, and for them to kind of bring everybody into the same room, I think really kind of resonated with kids of the 80s like us that grew up watching those movies. And I think that's a bit of where the term comes from too.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think Dolph might be the ultimate one, right? That's considered, was expend. It's like, oh, we've got this big blonde guy in a movie. We can make him be a Russian, we can make him be whatever we want, and then, oh, you know what? We don't need him anymore. So he's just going to do direct-to-video stuff. But there was something about Dolph that a lot of directors wanted to work with. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that when he did action scenes, when he did fight scenes, something like that, that as a top-notch athlete like that, he had a lot of muscle memory. He could do the scenes really well. But I think for us, it was that larger-than-life presence that was still there in a movie. Think of the direct-to-video ones like Detention, or some of those, like, really the ones that were not that great, or The Minion or something like that, where you're really just watching it for Dolph, and he's bringing it home. I mean, it's fun to watch him in that movie, but you'd think that larger than life presence would have translated more on the big screen. And for whatever reason, I really think part of it too is, I think Dolph, when he finally got things moving, that Hollywood really had moved in this direction of wanting to have smaller guys, sort of against the odds, and also trying to take regular actors that you wouldn't think to be action oriented and having them play the parts. And I mean, we're seeing one right now. We're seeing Bad Boys with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. I mean, neither of those guys came into the industry as action stars or being in action movies, but yet it's kind of, the way movies are shot nowadays, you don't need to have big guys that can do stunts for those anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because, the first one that comes to my mind that's like that is Bruce Willis. Mm-hmm. And, Die Hard was 88, and that's about right around the time where Dolph started going to direct to video. So, I mean, I think he got something there with that.
Yeah, and you think about too, then as the 90s go on, and Stallone and Schwarzenegger also start to fall off a bit, then you go, forget about Bruce Willis. Now you're getting like Matt Damon in the Bourne Identity movies, and it's like they're determining, like, it's not even just that we don't, I mean, Bruce Willis's character didn't really do karate. He just kind of punched people and through cars at helicopters and things like that, or made helicopters shoot up ramps at or whatever. But now you've got Matt Damon, who nobody thought of as an action star, and it's like, well, if we can edit the frames and split-second movements, we can make him look like he knows karate and he's taking out people, or he knows martial arts and he can take people out. Now it's like, oh, well, who else can we do this with? Well, maybe, Liam Neeson, we could try it with him, we can do it. And I think that was also a thing where I think for us as action fans, we always love to see a larger-than-life character like a Dolph up there kind of just doing it. I know Michael Jai White talked about that, about the alpha male kind of thing, and maybe that's part of it, maybe that's what it is, but I think for us more it's, we knew Dolph from Rocky IV and that kind of that presence that he had, the I will break you kind of thing. And it's always been fun to see him, whatever he does in new things, kind of, I don't know if you say like he's doing the same thing. He's not the same character as that, but it's that kind of that idea of this big, larger-than-life Swede who's just out there beating people up and whatnot, and kind of chewing up scenery in his scenes.
Well, there are those template movies like the Die Hard in a school, like Detention, or like the kind of like the One Last Mission kind of movies, like can't think of the one right now, but but movies like Missionary Man, kind of like the guy that the lone wolf who's like drawn into. So all these movies like of his, kind of they're falling back on those old B movie tropes that we could kind of just kind of pluck him into that situation. But I think more often than not, it's the plot is secondary. You're watching a Dolph movie for Dolph. He's one of those handful of guys, like if his name, I just see Dolph on there, I'll say, okay, I'll watch it. So
yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that it's just one of those, he's in select company. Basically anybody that's in an Expendables movie, you and I know will watch. Right. Even from Stallone and Schwarzenegger down to like Gary Daniels and whoever else they can find to to be the third henchman on the left.
Yeah, and it was funny too. You mentioned about stealing the movie because I feel like like Dolph, like you said, I think it feels like he stole the first one, and then the second one, it feels like Van Damme, who word on the street was that Van Damme. I think he even said it in JCVD that he was offered a part and he didn't like the part that Stallone gave him. So it was kind of like when he saw how big it was, he's like, well, okay, people wanted me in this movie, I probably should have done it. And so Stallone's like, well, you can be the baddie in the next one, and he steals that one. He's like, him and Scott Adkins, it felt like because it felt like Dolph's character in the second one was more just like running around with a big gun, shooting things and yelling, and they didn't quite give him the parts that they gave him in the first one. So it's interesting, and I almost feel like Stallone felt like when he made the third one that he was just like, you guys just keep stealing the movie from me, so when I make the third one, you guys are done, and I'm going to bring in these kids that there's no way, Kellen Lutz and Ronda Rousey's going to steal the movie from me, so you guys can hang out and wait for the end of the movie, and which I felt like the third one was the worst of them because of that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that, but I think three, I think Wesley Snipes steals the movie right from the beginning. As soon as they bust him out, you're like applauding. And, is he well utilized after that? Maybe not. But then along comes Mel Gibson, and he just chews the scenery like only Mel Gibson can. And, again, it goes back to the old schoolyard discussions, like who would win, Rambo or Martin Riggs, and you get to see that fight. So I mean, I do think it is a bit of a come down from the other two, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, you make a good point that, like, even though he was trying to avoid somebody stealing the movie from him, Mel Gibson still did it anyway. So it's kind of like he may have organized it to try to get all the big names out of there, and ended up being that the baddie took it again. So yeah, it didn't matter either way. So as we're wrapping up here, any final thoughts or ideas on Dolph and his career?
Well, I mean, it's I would like to think of it as a Dolphissance, a Renaissance Dolph, that we're experiencing now, because like you said, we could, watch a movie like Altitude in the comfort of our own home via streaming, or, we could go to the theater and see Dolph on a seahorse underwater being the underwater king, or being Ivan Drago once again. And like I said, he's been on like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's even been, kind of doing, episodic television here and there. I think him and Stallone have a TV show that they're working on. So I think, as we progress through the 21st century, wherever we go, Dolph's going to be there. And I don't think he's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it, a Dolphissance, that we're, it feels like all those years where it was just us liking Dolph, and now everybody gets to enjoy or gets to see what we found as so good before. But yet at the same time, we're still getting those DTV ones that we like Altitude, which I think was just like you said, I think it was kind of a throwback to some of those older. I mean, generally Dolph when his older ones, he didn't have small parts like he did in this one, but it still was kind of a throwback to some of those. I mean, I think in the 90s, Dolph would have been Denise Richards' character. So I think maybe you're right that he saw the script and he was like, I'm happy to let Denise Richards. I'm in my 60s now. Let Denise Richards do that part, and I can be the guy sitting on the plane, just making cracks at the baddie or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully there's more Expendables in the pipe, and hopefully, whatever he makes, like I said, I'll watch. So I think the sky's the limit. I mean, he was even in, albeit briefly, he was in the Coen Brothers movie, Hail Caesar. Even though he was largely cut out, he's still in it if you look hard enough for it. So he's definitely on Hollywood's radar, and I welcome anytime Dolph cares to be on my TV screen, I'll watch it.
Yes, I think that's a good way, a good note to leave it on. And I agree with you there. And I think that term, I like that term, Dolphissance. I think that's really what we're seeing now, and I think it's kind of exciting to kind of see what happens as we go through this decade here. I mean, he's in his 60s now, so we're probably going to see more like Altitude than we see him in doing really, really heavy duty things, but I don't think he's slowing down at any point, and I think that's really good for us to kind of see him in as much stuff as possible.
Exactly, my sentiments exactly. And again, if he can find scripts that have just a little bit more wit, or just kind of like a fun way around some old tired cliches like Altitude does, the more the merrier.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, yeah. Now, before we wrap up here, Mitch, let them know where can they find you on social media and the blog and all of that.
My Twitter handle is the Video Vacuum, or you can just look for Mitch Lovell. I do links to my reviews there almost daily, depending on what my schedule's like. And then my blog itself is the Video Vacuum at Blogspot. And if you're interested in any further reading, I have my latest book is The Bloody Book of Horror, which I review a bunch of horror movies. That can be found on Amazon. And also, if you like my thoughts on Dolph movies, I also wrote a book called The Unexpendable Guide to Action Movie Heroes. And that's where I take every chapter is devoted to somebody that's been in an Expendables movie. And of course, plenty of reviews for Dolph can be found there.
Perfect. Now, with your books, do you have an author page on Amazon, or are there links on the website or the blog?
There are links on the blog, and if you just go to Amazon and just search my name, Mitch Lovell, all the books will be there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I need to check out, especially that Expendables one. I've been meaning to check that one out, so I should probably get on that and see, because I think that's really cool. Definitely for further reading for everyone. So for sure. Now, just for me, same as always. Twitter at DTV Connoisseur, Instagram at DTV Connoisseur. The blog is dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com, and then Facebook would be Direct to Video Connoisseur. It's the only one that's not DTV Connoisseur. That one's actually Direct to Video Connoisseur. And then Letterboxd, I'm on there now as well, I think, as well as DTV Connoisseur. So just wrapping up, Mitch, thank you again for coming on. This was another great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's so many topics out there that we could definitely connect again for sure. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.